Hi to everyone on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed the video so far. This is my full interview with Diana June, the primary composer for the music and sound effects of Yume Nikki Dream Diary. Uh, I know a lot of people, myself included, are big fans of your work, so thanks again for taking the time to answer some questions for us.
Thank you for having me here.
So right off the bat, I wanted to ask you about kind of your background in music, how you started making music, how long you've been making music, and how you ended up kind of with this career in video game sound design.
Yeah, I always had passion for music. I think it's something that I got from my father. And I started playing piano as a child, or even though I don't consider myself a pianist at all because it was very in and out. And I was in some rock bands when I was a teenager. And then I started producing for myself when I started uni, so about 18, 19 or so, which I found very liberating to be able to produce the sounds that you hear directly in the way you want and not depend on anybody else or some band members that have different ideas, which sometimes is fun to collaborate with others, but yeah, then you get to choose.
Yeah. You also mentioned before this interview that you started wanting to pursue visual art and you switched into music. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually studied graphic design in university, and I think generally I'm probably better at drawing than I'm at music, in the way that it comes easily for me to draw, compared to music has been a very winding road. I had to study a lot. It doesn't come as naturally for me. So at some point it made me a bit insecure having those two to compare. But in a way, I find that having studied and taking music from a more intellectual point of view makes it easier for work purposes rather than drawing. It's more of my thing that I do for myself. So I was very lucky to have this career change in a very organic way because at the time I entered active gaming media, I was going around with my Illustrator portfolio and hoping to have a job as a concept artist. I also studied a bit of 3D and animation, whatever I could get around. And by the time I got the interview, they said, well, all of our art positions are covered, but the sound designer has just left. So as I wrote in my CV that I had a little bit of experience producing by myself, they said, well, would you mind doing a sound test? And if we like it, you can stay as a sound designer. And that's what happened. And honestly, I'm very glad that that happened.
I was wondering, was working on video games always a goal for you?
Yeah, in the back of my mind, for sure. Like, I love video games. And it's been a dream that I would like to pursue, but I was not completely sure if I would have the chance. So still, I tried and it worked out. So it's happy.
So, in your work with AGM, you've been mostly working on sound design for video games, right?
Yeah, yeah. In the end, most of my professional career has been about design since that experience, which is, I think it was around 2016. I started working with them in a previous game called Astro Boy Edge of Time. I was purely doing sound design back then. Then there was a point where they needed a tiny loop song in one section and they didn't have time to hire some outsourcing or something like that. So they asked me, do you are you able to do it? And I was like, okay, I'll try. And then yeah, that was the first song I did. And right after that it came the Yume Nikki Dream Diary project. So I think in a way doing that little loop opened that door to actually having the chance to do the sound and the music for Dream Diary.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what other games you worked on for AGM. I know you mentioned Astro Boy. Did you work on anything after Dream Diary?
For a while, no. I finished Dream Diary, then I got on other projects that had nothing to do with art or music, and then now I came back to it.
Okay. Are you able to talk about that at all, or? It's
I
okay if you're
can't
not.
mention it. Maybe I was recommended not to,
Yeah, that's
but
fine then. I was wondering for music, are there any game soundtracks or just albums in general that inspired you to pursue music as a career?
yeah, I think one of my earliest memories with game soundtracks was Ape Escape, if you know it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I used to play that a lot when I was a child, and I even left it on while doing my homework just to listen to the music. And I think that's what got me started of, oh, one day I wish I could do something like this. And it happens that this month I met Soichi Terada, the composer, in person, and I got to talk to him, which was like a such milestone in my life. And I got to ask him a few questions about sound, so that was great, like how circle closes and which is also what happened with Yume Nikki a bit too, that it was like a circle closing. But anyway, yeah, about the other soundtracks, I think Spyro also, like from childhood, and then other games like Journey, and especially indie games, I think are very creative about soundtrack, and sometimes you find very cool ideas. And in general, in music, I love Björk and Kate Bush, and I think at the time of Yume Nikki, I was listening a lot to Take Me Apart by Kelela. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it came out about that time, and I've been obsessed since then. Also, Utada Hikaru is a big inspiration for me. It feels like home. And then Wendy Carlos, if you know, it feel like ambient music. I think Wendy Carlos was one of the pioneers. Along with Brian Eno, I was listening to a lot during that era, and Aphex Twin, and Mike Oldfield, and Arca, and anything I can get hold of.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Bjork. I've actually just recently started getting into her music. I'm such a big fan of Vespertine. I think the
Yeah.
production on that album is crazy. And also Kate Bush has started to become more popular because of
Oh yeah, I'm
Stranger
so glad
Things.
about that.
Yeah,
It was about time she got recognized because I think at the time people didn't really understand what she was doing. Maybe the time has caught up with her finally. I hope.
yeah.
So please listen to Beyond Running Up That Hill. There is a lot more cool stuff there.
Of course. Ape Escape is also interesting because to me that soundtrack is a lot different than at least the music that I've heard from you. It's kind of like a jungle kind of
Yeah.
electronic. Um, have you ever tried to make music like that or?
I'm trying now. One of the secrets is that maybe by the time this interview is out, I'm trying to put an EP out of very old songs. I think some of the songs are even before I started working on Yume Nikki, like from 2015 or so. But yeah, it's definitely influenced by that. It's a bit of like the songs I would like to have done when I was a child, just to make little Diana happy and then move on to do some new stuff that I'm more interested in afterwards. But I think for me, Ape Escape was important because I studied it a lot in order to make loops for because the structure is a bit different from a pop song to a game song. So for me, yeah, it was a lot of study about how it's built up and how to go back to the loop and the ups and downs of the music. So yeah, maybe it's not direct influence because it's a lot more up tempo, but in the structure, maybe you can find some similarities.
Right. So I was going to ask you if you worked in office with AGM, but you told me that you worked remotely. Were you working?
Yeah,
You were working with AGM before you started working on Dream Diary, right?
yes.
Um, could you just tell me like what it was like kind of coming onto that project? Like, do you remember how they approached you about working on it?
Yeah, I think it was the project director and the art director who I was friends with, and they briefed the project to me, and I was very happy because I had played Yume Nikki before in high school, and I was very excited about this project. So, but the thing is that I was living very far from the city, so and also all my equipment was at home, And as a sound designer, also you need to record many things, so it doesn't really make much sense to work in an office with noise and
Right.
not a proper space to record things. Which, I mean, the proper space was my closet, but at least I had a closet. And yeah, so the briefing part of Yume Nikki, I honestly don't remember very well, because it was not that clear. It was becoming clear as the project went on. So, but we knew it was Yume Nikki, which for me was a big deal. So
Right. So you worked remote, but you said that you were a bit away from the office. Does that mean you were in Japan while you were working for AGM?
yes, I had been in Japan for 3 years already, I think.
That's interesting. Like, how did you end up in Japan?
Yeah, that's a very long story. But yeah, I mean, I had a friend who was living there, and then he told me, "Why don't you come over for a few months?" And then started to say, "Why don't you stay longer?" And because I was very curious about Japan, I think, especially for people of our generation, it's being in a way like culturally a second home in some sense, and yeah, I wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes for real for a long time. So I took the chance. Then I met some people. Then I got married. And then, yeah, and it's been a long story, but it really stretched my points of view and what I know. And it's been a great experience, but at some points it was really hard. It was not always so pleasant.
Yeah. So speaking of the people on the team at AGM, did it seem like people in the office generally were already fans of Yume Nikki when that project came along?
I know that the art director was really fun, and that's the one I talked to the most. I think the rest, yes, but I cannot say for sure because I really didn't have much contact with them.
Right. So you mentioned that you first played Yume Nikki in high school. Do you remember anything about kind of first hearing about the game or how you ended up playing
It
it
was
for the
my
first time?
friend, one of my best friends was really into it, and she showed me, and we even started talking about making our own RPG Maker games. And in a way, I thought that was also very liberating because it was, yeah, interesting time, the beginning of the internet, and getting to, yeah, discover things from other countries and just online, being able to actually do things for yourself. So we didn't get to anything in the end, but it was a fun time. So I remember it quite dearly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting that it inspired you to maybe go into game development with RPG Maker. I've seen a lot of stories of my research for this documentary about how Yume Nikki has inspired people to create stuff. Um,
Yeah.
One other final question about AGM. There were pre-release interviews with some of the team working on Dream Diary where they mentioned that everybody who worked on Dream Diary was kind of tasked with playing the entire original game before working on Dream Diary. Did you hear anything about that?
I really don't know. I didn't get to play it because I had already played it before.
Right.
And also there was very limited time, so what I did when I didn't remember how one part was to just, yeah, walk through in YouTube to get there in the, like, in the background. I was watching that while maybe composing some music, but I don't know about the rest.
So you didn't have time to play Yume Nikki while you were working on the soundtrack. How long had it been since you had played Yume Nikki when you began working on Dream Diary?
Well, I guess about 10 years, 8 years. I don't know, something like that.
Wow.
But it's a very strong memory anyway. There's no
Yeah.
other game like that, so yeah, I kind of recall the whole atmosphere.
Okay. Well, moving into your work on Dream Diary, I was wondering how much direction were you given in terms of what the team wanted for the soundtrack, and how much creative freedom did you have in kind of doing your own thing with those tracks?
Yeah, generally I was given some references track from Yume Nikki, but also from other games or other artists that could inspire some new creation. And then I went on experimenting a bit, not knowing what I was doing, and then get to narrow down. Okay, we get some different possibilities, and then choose maybe it's more this direction, and then continue working in that direction. Then, yeah, just narrowing down and trying to get to more accurate what the level was trying to express and the ambience and.
Okay. I was also wondering, were there any tracks that you produced for the game that ended up having to be cut, just because like the area wasn't there or something like that?
Not really, I think. There was some test tracks that I did at the very beginning just to trying to get the atmosphere right, but it was not for a specific level yet, so cannot really count them as being cut off because it was not the purpose anyway.
Right. Well, were there any tracks that you ended up having to like change a lot or revise a lot?
I don't think so. Yeah, we didn't have time for that. Like, it would be, yeah, trying to focus a lot of the energy on a specific point when the track was needed. Once it was okay, then move on to the next thing. So, no, it went pretty smoothly in that sense.
Okay. So, this is actually a fan question from the subreddit. A couple of people were asking which songs felt the hardest and easiest to write for the soundtrack.
I'd say that the easiest. It's hard to tell. This question is tricky. I would say that maybe the easiest are the ones that already have a very clear idea, like the Dream Diary, like the save menu.
Right.
Because it was already there. So all I could add to it maybe was some pads, some little details to fill in the blanks, but there was not much I could do. While others was like an idea, like because the loops are very short, right? So the idea is there, but it allows for developing in that sense that, okay, how do I want to develop, right? And how to maintain the idea clearly. I think the hardest ones were like the barracks settlement or the main menu one too, because have to keep it, but at the same time not being the same and developing it a bit. It's, yeah, I think that took most time. Also, the one song that is called Fear, that is when the shadow follows you, that was a hard one for different reasons, I don't know. And just because it was like so dark, but at the same time I didn't want it to be too much horror, but still a bit nuanced. It was, yeah, a hard one. And yeah, I think those mostly.
Yeah, I do remember from the soundtrack for the game that the barracks theme is very different from the original. It's kind of more up-tempo, and I remember people talking about that, but it also fits more with the new game. It's kind of interesting how you flipped the atmosphere of that track.
I really like the original, and I wanted it to be a bit more nostalgic too. I think in general, I think I was in a good position considering also that I had played the game so long ago, so I was not so closely attached to it in a way that I would still have a very fixed idea of how it looks in the game. So I think I don't know, like I had my own memories and my own feelings as a filter. So in a way, yeah, I kind of wanted to express through that little loop, but also how I remember that level or how I felt about it, and also how it feels currently. So it was fun to work on.
That's an interesting point. You kind of had built-in nostalgia that you were like viewing those songs through. I was wondering, kind of outside of the original, soundtrack, were there any specific inspirations for your work on Dream Diary, in terms of like other music or other soundtracks?
Sure, but I don't remember which one exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it was more experimenting by myself rather than trying to get bits and pieces from other tracks of other people. I remember at some point, for example, having a Desired Constellation by Björk in the kind of textures that that song uses, but I forgot which song I tried to put that in.
That's fine. So we've talked a lot about kind of reworking Kikiyama's tracks, but there are also a couple of songs on Dream Diary's soundtrack that are entirely new. So I was wondering how you kind of attempted to replicate the atmosphere of the original, and also how you tried to make the songs have a kind of dreamlike atmosphere. How did you approach the idea of making songs that are supposed to play in someone's dream?
Yeah, honestly, those were the hardest in a way, because when you have some reference that you can use, it's always going to sound like Kikiyama because it's
Right.
their song. So, but trying to do it from the beginning, actually, there is a kind of a funny story because one of the tracks that were made entirely by me is the school one. That is actually the first one I've ever worked on. And it was the one that I had most time for because it was the first level that we were making. So there was a lot to get to. So I had, I think, at least 1 month or two to work on it. And I think that settled a lot the kind of mood. And also it settled how I later approached Kikiyama's work. I think that was like a happy, how to say, coincidence that I worked first on my own track, because that way I could I could understand what my territory kind of was and then try to bring the original songs more to my terrain rather than the other way around. And I, for that song, for example, I tried to, I was just experimenting a lot, like until it felt right, until it felt like that it had that kind of color and that kind of mood. I also got lost into the sound a lot because I had the time to do so, and I think in a way that shows that there is more production that went into that song until I got it right. I don't know if I explained that very well, but
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't know that they started with the school level. It's kind of unique that the game started with the new content and not like a recreation of something from the original game.
yeah.
I was wondering, what kind of tools or instruments did you use to produce the soundtrack? Was it entirely done in like a DAW, or did you have any organic instrumentation? I know you were kind of on a time crunch.
Yeah, I had Ableton, and I played a lot with the Ableton plugins. And I also used one plugin called Mini Beat, which is for 8-bit sounding. Even on things that were not purely 8-bit, I just used it as a base because it's a very pure sound, and then put a lot of reverb on it or put other effects to change the character of the sound. Later on, I got this synth. It's the Mini Nova. And but that was only for the last two songs, which I think were the dogs, and then the main menu was the last song, I think. So until then, yeah, it was purely done on the DAW.
Okay. So, what kind of material were you given to work with from the game's original soundtrack? Did they give you anything like stems or MIDI, or even like key or BPM info, or did you have to figure everything out just from?
Yeah, yeah. I just by ear and tapping the thing, and then to which for the textural, some of the loops are very textural, some others are more melodic, so that's easier. But the textural ones, I remember going with the EQ from Ableton and trying to figure out, is this A, is this F sharp, what is this? Because it's hard to hear what the. But then just playing around and trying to figure out, okay, this note sounds better, this is completely off, and that kind of thing. Yeah. Also, I played a lot with reversing textures and from instruments or from any kind of sound that I could get, like stretching and speeding up and just any kind of idea that I got at the time that will do.
Wow. So for the tracks from Kikiyama, are there any finished tracks in Dream Diary where you sampled from the original track, or is it all like recreated from scratch?
No, I sampled a few times. I think it's the in the nighttime school when you enter the rooms, that's directly sampled from the number world. What I did is to EQ. So for example, if I wanted to maybe leave the bass out from the original track, so I could add my own bass, and then I think that Dogs also has the original track as a part of the texture, but it's not all the time. I wanted to have it there as a wink to it, like yes, it's the original, but build around rather than rely on it as a base. I think my way of working too was a lot of in music you generally have 4 lines. One is the melody, the chords, the bass, and the beat. So it was a bit of figuring out which the original track would fit more into. So like for example, the save menu is purely melody. So then I could play around with the bass or textures or the beat. And other that are more textural, maybe lean more on the mids, which is the chords, and then so like that. It depended on the track, and some of them I chose to keep them in because otherwise it would be, I don't know, I felt that it was missing something otherwise, and or even if I tried to recreate it, it wouldn't be the same. And also thinking of me as a fan, I would like to hear it sometimes there too, but a bit, yeah, turn around and a bit more stretched out and developed as a whole idea.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all for sampling those tracks, because I know, at least like just from the cursory kind of times that I've looked into them, I know a lot of them are very weird with BPM and kind of atonal. The way that Dream Diary recreates them, I think that it would be very difficult if you weren't given anything else to try to recreate the sounds on that OST. So I know you already told me off camera that you didn't meet Kikiyama, but people are gonna get people are gonna get mad at me if I don't ask. So like, have you heard anything about like feedback on your work on the soundtrack? If they like it at all?
I honestly would die to know what they think of it, but I really have no idea. I know that a few people, very few people, I don't know if it was 2 or 3, the company actually got the chance to talk to him. I don't know, like probably some people on the internet know more than I do, but I really have no idea.
I just think that that's so interesting that you were part of, like, you had such an integral role, like, creatively in Dream Diary's development. I would think that, you know, Kikiyama would, at the very least, greenlight kind of your work on the soundtrack, but I don't know. I know you can't speak on that. I was wondering, you mentioned that you mixed all of the tracks on Dream Diary's soundtrack. How was the mastering done? Did they outsource that, or did you master them, or are they just not mastered? I can't tell.
It's not mastered, and it's probably not even mixed. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had a nervous breakdown over that because it was really my first time trying to mix things, and I was just figuring out things as I went, mostly from YouTube videos. So I remember thinking, this cannot come out. People are going to realize I'm a total fraud. I don't know what this is. And actually, I was very surprised too when I got to read some comments that people actually liked it. I thought, wow, I never expected that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of an advantage of ambient music, is that the mixing doesn't matter that much in ambient. But I know as well, just from my experience making music, that like mixing and mastering is a completely different skill set
Yes.
from producing music. And you know, there are people who their entire job is just mixing and mastering.
I'd say the trick would be, yeah, for ambient music, you generally have a lot of reverb. The trick is to probably EQ afterwards. EQ the reverb so it doesn't get too muddy.
Yeah.
That's what I learned.
I mean, for anything that I've ever worked on, the extent of my mastering has just been like putting a limiter on the master and boosting it up to 0 dB. Like,
Multi-band dynamic. That was what I was always doing.
yeah. So, moving past the soundtrack, I know you also mentioned doing the sound effects for the game. So, a lot of the sound effects in the game, especially for like the monsters, are very visceral and kind of dark. Was there a conscious choice to make Dream Diary more of like a horror focused game, at least from like the sound design perspective?
Yeah, it was not my choice though. And I think it was, I don't know, I cannot really talk on this, but yeah, there was references to other games that lean more on the horror side. And I think it's also due to the lack of time that you had to play it safe and do something that no will work, even if it's not so into the exploring side of Yume Nikki as the original was. Some of the sounds, yeah, definitely are more horror. I think one of the monsters is me eating mandarins. And another one, actually, yeah, even the voices of the monsters, I had to do them myself, just pitching them down and making weird voices. So that might be a fun fact.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you recorded the monster sounds, because obviously they didn't come from a sound library. I think that's really interesting that they were done so practically. So, aside from the monsters, something that got brought up on the subreddit that I was also interested in, the human characters in Dream Diary, Medotsky and the other human characters have voices that they didn't have in Yume Nikki.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering, what was the discussion or thought process around that decision? Was it something that you decided, or?
Not really. I was a bit like worried that it would sound a bit weird, but I honestly don't remember much about this conversation originally. But yeah, at some point it was decided that they will have voices. Otherwise, it sounded kind of empty and impersonal, and yeah. So I ended up recording a few voices for the characters. I hope it didn't sound too strange.
No, not at all. I was actually gonna ask you if you knew who voiced them. Was that you?
Yeah, it was me.
That's crazy. That means that you have the official voice of Medotsky.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and also Monoe is a true nervous breakdown. I was really crying one day, and then I thought, oh shit, I have to record this. So, and at the same time, I started kind of laughing about it myself because the situation was completely absurd suddenly. Like me, I was crying about something and then going to the microphone and I said, no, concentrate on what's hurting you and then keep crying. And it went on in the game. And also the screaming is pretty, yeah, accurate. I mean, at least real.
Yeah, well, it seems like you were wearing like a lot of different hats in the production of this. You were working on the sound effects, the music, and you did voice acting for it. Did you have any background in voice acting, or?
No, and I think it shows a little, but
I think
I have
mean,
to get to.
I think that it's very impressive, honestly, and you know, for a game like Yume Nikki, it's kind of I wouldn't be able to imagine how you could implement voices into that game in a way that feels organic. But I think that, like I said, I think it's a pretty impressive um,
Thank
kind of
you.
translation of the original. Did you feel any pressure during the development of the game about expectations that Yume Nikki fans would have for your work? Did you expect there to be like a kind of a high bar set by the original?
Yeah, I think that was a general feeling that we were worried in general that we knew we could do as much as we could do in that time frame. At least art director and me, we were talking about it like we wish this would be more developed. We just wish it was. No, because we had some attachment to it, so we were worried that the internet was going to be very harsh on us.
So yeah, you've mentioned a lot that it seems like the team was under a kind of time crunch. Do you know why the development period was so short for the game? Was there a reason that they were kind of because so little has happened with the Yume Nikki IP for so long.
Yeah,
Do you know why?
I I don't know. I was not in the conversations with Kadokawa or anything, so I really have no idea. But I guess it's just often studios and publishers have different ideas of what they want or what they need, and then or how the actual development happens. I think they just wanted to fit a target that they fit much a target that they may have, and that was it.
Okay. How much time did you have to make the soundtrack for the game, or like when did they first approach you, and how long was it until the music needed to be finished for it to ship with the game?
Well, I was working on it at the same time as the sound effects, just as things came out. Okay, now we need a song. Now we need these 10 sound effects and just continue. So it was all in the same time frame, very organic in a way, or very just as it came around, I just produced what was needed.
How early on into development generally, like were you starting with the soundtrack like right at the beginning, or did they bring you
Yeah.
on later?
Yeah, actually, as I said, I was first working on the school song. And then sounds come when there is actual things happening. So generally, you can work on music just when you have like a general concept of how the colors, how the place is going to look. While sound have to be when already it's implemented, and then you make the sound and then just put it there. So yeah, generally I guess I work on the songs just when the levels was beginning, and then as it developed, then I started working on the sounds.
So did they know from the beginning like you're going to be recreating like these tracks from the original, or was it a process throughout development where they were like, okay, we decided we're going to do the Pink Sea, so you have to make a recreation of that
Yeah, it
track?
was more that second case.
Okay. So the members of the team that you were interacting with, do you know how they felt about the game, like before the release, during the rollout for the game, and then after it came out?
Yeah, I think we were all a bit nervous and a bit frustrated too that it was not in the state we wish it would be, but yeah, that's what it is many times with games.
Uh, did the team expect the game to get as much attention as it did? Because I remember in 2018, there was a timer on a website, and
Yeah, I remember that.
a bunch of major kind of gaming publications were posting about it. It was kind of like a viral moment for the franchise. Was it expected that the game was going to generate that kind of hype, or were they expecting it to be kind of like a smaller title?
Well, I didn't expect it to get too much hype because I always thought that it's a very old game in a way, that it has its own community that is very loyal to it. But apart from that, I was not expecting people outside of it to know it. And I think it also references a lot to the original, so I don't know how much you would understand without playing the original too. So how much is it really accessible for a general public? I was not paying much attention to it, to be honest, on the while the campaign was going on, because I thought if I care about that, I'll never be able to produce anything. But yeah.
Were you paying much attention to the reception of the game after it came out? Like, did you see any of the responses to your work on the soundtrack?
Yes, and honestly, for me, it was very cathartic. Because I was not expecting it. I really thought people were not going to like it as much, or maybe think that, it was not up to their standard or something. And then, generally, the comments for the music were really good, and it shook away many of my doubts, really. So even today, when I'm feeling insecure, when I feel, when I doubt my abilities, I even go back to the comments and feel, okay, if people really felt for this, then I can do this.
So, kind of wrapping up this section, this is just kind of a catch-all question, but can you remember any funny or interesting stories from the game's development or the release of the game that kind of didn't get mentioned?
Yeah, I have like some little detail, like for example, once I was recording something else, and then my stomach being hungry got recorded in the microphone by mistake, and then I ended up using that for when the shadow people turn. That they turn and they do like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that's actually my stomach. I don't know. Apart from that, the song for the secret ending, one that it's just piano, it was actually me improvising, and it was shipped as it is. My idea was originally to improvise and just see where, some new melodies come in, and then add the pieces I didn't like so much, leave the pieces that I like, and then write a score and try to play it properly so it doesn't sound like somebody just trying to figure out what they're playing. But they said, no, we like it as it is, just it has more the feeling of somebody actually playing the piano. And I thought, okay, well, there you go. And another one would be, I originally wrote the track for the Pink Sea in a serviette, because at the time I was traveling abroad and I had to do it, and I didn't have the computer at that moment, so it was a very different way of composing, I guess, because it was a lot more intellectual, just going through the chords in a very analytical way, and then afterwards hearing them and thinking, okay, I guess I'll change this. But compared to the others, that it was more getting into the sound, and from the sound, just trusting my ear, this was completely the other way around. So these are the things I remember at the top of my head.
The Pink Sea track is actually my favorite track from the game, so that's pretty interesting.
Thank you. I always wonder, because I don't know why they said that we didn't use the original track there, and I don't remember why. But it was something. Oh, let's do something completely new, and
honestly, I think it fits better than the original does. The sound design, I don't know, there's like a fizz in the background of that track that just is really interesting.
White noise.
To me. Yeah.
Probably from Serum, I think. I was using a lot, I forgot in the plugin section, the Native Instruments form, which is a granular synthesizer. So I would put whatever sound, even like sound from my kitchen, and just put it there and play around with it, and that creates some interesting textures too.
What you mentioned about the secret ending theme is also interesting, because I've seen people kind of analyze the soundtrack of Dream Diary and talk about how organic that track feels. It's interesting to know that that wasn't intentional. I
was very shy about it. I thought, this cannot be released like this, but then I kind of let go of it, and I thought, okay, I guess it has its own feeling to it.
I think it fits well. So, like closing off this section, I wanted to ask, what is your favorite track that you produced for Dream Diary, or the one that you're most proud of?
Hmm. I think I like the school one, as I said, but I think it's also because it has more of what I was feeling at the time. I think in general, I was lucky because the kind of music that Yume Nikki has, it's also very ominous and it has some space for me, in this case, to put my own feelings in it, even though it's. So I would say that one, maybe the evening, the one from the barrack settlement, because it was hard to come around, but when it did, it felt right, and I was happy with the result. Also, maybe the flute room one, just because it was a bit different to the others, and it had that more innocent feeling compared to the rest, that it's a bit more heavy. And yeah, I also like the one at the ending, because I somehow felt hopeful while doing it, which is also rare compared to the other ones to have. So I think those are the ones who give it a bit more spice to the general feeling, because the rest are more, yeah, like textural based and more of a background soundtrack. I think these ones maybe stand out because they have more melodies and structure compared to the more textural ones.
I agree about the ending theme. I think that in general, the ending of Dream Diary is really kind of an interesting juxtaposition from the rest of the game. It's a very optimistic ending, which is kind of unheard of in general for like a Yume Nikki project, and the music complements it well. So anyway, going back to the original game, I was wondering what kind of memories or feelings you have attached to that game, kind of independent of your work on the soundtrack.
Yeah, well, I think it's a piece of art. I've been playing this week again just to remember a few things, and it just shocks me like the first time because there's nothing similar to it. And even since then, there hasn't really been a game so like unpretentious is the word, like just being what it is. And I think it's a very strong representation of what dreaming feels like, which is a very hard thing to achieve. And yeah, it definitely has a lot of room for your own imagination too, because it's very abstract and any kind of interpretation. I liked when games are or games or films or whatever that leaves room for you to interpret it instead of giving, oh, A B C, this is what's happening, and that's what you have to get through, and that's all. Yeah, I it also came out in, yeah, like in a high school time, so a lot of changes in my personal life. So yeah, of course, there's a lot of personal memories attached to it. But yeah, generally, I think it was a game-changing game.
Yeah, I first played Yume Nikki around the same time when I was in high school. Um, it's interesting that you have a memory of how you first heard about it, because a surprisingly large number of people that I've talked to have no idea. Like, it was just something that kind of existed forever and they eventually played it.
I see.
You mentioned that you were replaying the game recently. Do you have any like standout world from the original game that maybe is your favorite?
I think actually Pink Sea, I like the atmosphere there and also the snow world. I also like yeah, a little bit trippier ones, like the number world, like that. Yeah, or the dogs. I think the dogs has a very specific atmosphere too, with the lanterns in the sea. And there are many bits and hidden places that are very specific, and it has so much detail.
Yeah. Um, have you played any of the fan games for Yume Nikki, or were you aware of
Mhm.
kind of the
I am aware, but I have never played any.
During the development of Dream Diary, were you aware of I don't know, like Yume Nikki or Dot Flow?
Yeah, I think there was a conscious decision of not including anything from there. Also because it has a different ownership, I guess.
Right.
And yeah, it's other people's interpretations of the original game, so we were sticking to the original in the end.
That's fair. So going back to Yume Nikki, from the perspective of a music producer, how do you feel about the soundtrack for Yume Nikki?
I think it's kind of genius, really, because as I said, it's harder to convey a strong emotion in a 10 seconds loop that it is to develop a song around it, and you kind of have your structure and answer response and I mean question response, and in that short loop it's very hard to get that. Also, it works really well in the way that because it's so short, it kind of feels meditative. So to the point that it becomes part of it all. It doesn't have that much weight, but it's definitely there, and without it, it wouldn't feel the same. But at the same time, it kind of blends in with the images, and I also think that's very hard. Also, it's hard for a short loop not to become annoying, and generally, I feel that most of the tracks don't they get annoying at all. It just really blends well, and yeah, I think it's a very difficult task. Really, I admire that a lot. Also, analyzing some of the tracks, I realized that some of them are like a slowed down versions of it others, and it's so funny how just that simple trick can really change the whole feeling of the song. And so I would say that I learned a lot of things from analyzing the original soundtrack.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how your perspective on the soundtrack changed after you kind of ended up having to deconstruct it for Dream Diaries OST. Uh, was
Yeah, I
there
think I appreciate it a lot more now.
was there anything in terms of like production techniques or anything that kind of revealed itself to you messing around with the original audio files for the game that you think like normal listeners wouldn't pick up on?
Yeah, I mean, I have to dig back in memories a lot, so I wouldn't say any specific moments because I don't remember exactly what, but I remember having some moments of, wow, how did this happen? Like, I couldn't come up with this, especially, yeah, maybe more textural ones like the ones from the dogs or uh, uh, those ones are because it's very textural. Others like the more melodic ones are obviously more like 8 beats, so I can kind of figure out okay what kind of waves or what kind of scenes. But those are like how did that come around? It's such a level of experimentation, I guess, that it just maybe happened organically. I don't know, but I would like to. If I had a question for Kikiyama, that definitely would be it. What did you use?
Yeah, I mean, in my research for the documentary, looking back, like I can't say anything with certainty, obviously, because I don't know Kikiyama, but I think that the soundtrack for Yume Nikki was created using entirely hardware, like actual Yamaha like synths and
I
stuff, which
see.
is very interesting to
Yeah.
me that there wasn't really a digital component to it. It was all like played on actual keyboards.
That's very interesting, yeah. That's a lot harder than actually using a piece of dough that does it for you. I guess those were the times too. That time was not so developed, so.
Yeah, like 2004. Another fan question that people had. What are your favorite and least favorite tracks from the original game's soundtrack?
I think some of which I didn't do, but I wanted to do will be the Snow World. I I like those kinds of tracks that are more, I don't know, yeah, more rhythmical or more melodical too, like the mall rooftop too, or the chill folk world, the neon world, the rave, the monkey rave. I really like that one. Yeah, and Ponico's room also, which yeah, it's a cute one, but it's fun that to have the both versions of it too. Monoko one too. Yeah, I guess more the ones that sound more like songs, because it's like what you say, that with such limited equipment, it's hard to make those, to make some kind of feel like it has a structure, like it's just a piece of some bigger song, but it works by itself.
And then, are there any tracks that you feel like don't work in the original game's soundtrack?
Not really, but I guess it's also because, I cannot really analyze that objectively.
That's true.
But yeah, I felt that they all have its purpose and they complement the ambience very well.
Did you have any kind of like complicated or weird feelings about adding to Kikiyama's work, especially since you weren't really in contact with them?
I don't think so. Maybe I should have. But I was just trying to do my best, and I think I set the standard high enough for me, to the point that sometimes I was having a bit of a hard time. So when I was happy with it, I thought, okay, this is the best I could do, and this is how it's going to be. So try to pat myself a bit, like, okay, we are doing our best, and hope that people will like it, and hope that Kikiyama likes it. But I don't know.
Right. So like how did that process of making this soundtrack differ from like just making a normal soundtrack? Or rather reinterpreting somebody else's work. How did that differ from your normal creative process?
I think in a way it's easier because it feels more like an exercise rather than me having to express everything I feel through my song. That sometimes it gets a bit heavy and a bit too overwhelming. Just knowing that it's something from somebody else, it's a bit more like like acting, I guess. That I feel more okay, trying to put myself in their shoes. I get some distance, so in that sense, I think it's easier, but at the same time, it's hard. They're on different things. So yeah, well, it depends. It's just definitely different, but
What about the tracks that were new for Dream Diary? Like how did you attempt to kind of fit those into the original soundtrack or fit them into the world of Yume Nikki?
I just experimented until it sounded right, mostly, and I don't think it was a very conscious decision. So it's the school one, the Pink Sea. I think also, yeah, like using the type of instruments or the type of textures I was using for other song kind of blends it better. Yeah, maybe staying on the similar tempo, or having using similar scales, like more minor, more melancholic feeling. And
Okay. For the songs that you expanded from the original, did you feel like those lent themselves well to being expanded on? Or did you feel like you had to kind of extrapolate a lot from kind of what existed from the original to build them out into full songs?
no, I think it's more about keeping them as the base, like the original idea. Many songs also come from a short idea, right? Like maybe you start improvising and then a melody comes in. It has its own specific feeling, and you kind of get attached to it and trying to develop around it. I think in this case that melody was already there, so it was just save time in terms of improvising, but at the same time, yeah, trying to fit in around so it keeps the same feeling, not going completely different.
So, coming up on the end here, this is kind of unrelated, but there was a fan request for you to maybe put your music up on Bandcamp so that people could download it, or just make your music more widely available. So I was wondering, uh, I wrote, "Do you still have the masters to Dream Diary soundtrack?" But it wasn't mastered. Do you still have like?
Well, I think I still have the projects. I will have to check. And I probably will have to check also with the studio to see if that's allowed, because I'm not completely sure. But yeah, I would definitely like to do something like that, like actually mixing it with my current knowledge and getting it to how I wished it sounded at that time, but I didn't know how to make that happen. And yeah, I would like to just put it out there in some nice quality, so at least it gets to be listened properly. Because I know that somebody else uploaded them to YouTube in a way that the loop cuts, and I was not very happy with that. So yeah, I wish I can just put it out by myself. I'll try to research that and see if it can happen.
And you also mentioned that you're working on a new EP. Like, how are you planning on distributing that?
I mean, it's the same thing. I'm just studying as I go, and many times I get distracted, so I'm doing what I can. But yeah, I think it's going to be in the normal streaming platforms. Hopefully, probably, yeah, Bandcamp for sure, Spotify, and maybe SoundCloud. So SoundCloud is a bit dead, maybe. And yeah, let's see how that goes. I mean, it's just for the sake of it, just because it's been too long. Like, I've been carrying these songs for it's just 6 songs. Like, it's not that big, but I feel like maybe it's time to stop being so shy and just to put something out.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think that people would just like a way to follow you and know about new music that you work on. Maybe even, music that isn't necessarily related to video games. So I hope you do consider, kind of opening up a bit in terms of like having places for people to listen to your work.
I have to work on my online presence for sure. I think in a way, I don't know, it was not a very conscious decision, but I feel that during those years I was in Japan, I was a bit, yeah, for sure self-conscious, and I think I wasted a lot of time doubting. But now I realized, looking back, that also it was a time of observing. I feel that if I had been more worried about being online, I wouldn't have had that, space for myself and to actually see. And now that I'm back at the whole circle, maybe it's more time to put things out. But I'm just taking it. I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with social media anyway. Like, I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely I like to put some music out, and I love when people comment on my things and reading what it means for them. Actually means a lot. It's not. I never take that for granted. It's when people take the effort to actually write something. It's just thank you.
So I have one final question. And I ask this to basically everybody I know that has played this game. What do you think Yume Nikki is about?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I think it's hard to answer without projecting of what you want it to be about, because it could really be about many things. But definitely, yeah, there's the dreaming aspect to it, and a bit of diving into the subconscious world, I guess. Shadow work, maybe, like just trying to figure out things about yourself just by actually, yeah, being unafraid of whatever may come out in your own dreams. Honestly, Yume Nikki has also inspired me to write and draw my own dreams sometimes, and I find it very interesting that it's a universe of our own with its own symbols, and it's a very interesting discovery process too. That nobody else really lives there. It's just it exists, right? There's as many universes as people in this world, and that's amazing. And I hope we can look inside a bit more too, because there is so much to discover that many times we take it for granted or just disregard, like, okay, that's just when I'm dreaming, but you dream a lot of time in your life, and that feels as real life while you are in it. So yeah, definitely guess it's about that.
Yeah, I totally understand. Having an answer to that question it's like a loaded question. It's difficult to answer. I have no idea what the game is about, and I've made a 100-page documentary about it. Well, that was all I had written. So, thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. I think you gave
Thank you for reaching out.
Well, I think you gave some great answers, and I think fans are going to be really happy to hear from you. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you wanted to speak about that I kind of didn't get to cover?
I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say, maybe a bit more. but yeah, thanks a lot for reaching out to me. It honestly means a lot, because at the time I felt maybe that my work passed by a bit unnoticed in a way. Like many people didn't know who I was, but I guess most of it is my fault too. But yeah, so it's been interesting to go back and remember, and actually now it's been 4 years and a half, right? And think about how much impact that actually had, even for me. It really was a changing moment in my life to actually gather the courage to, okay, this is coming out, and this is what I also feel about Yume Nikki. In a way, it was, yeah, a lot of my feelings going through the music for the game, and I hope that got across. And yeah, it's been an interesting process to rediscover through this interview and talking to you, playing again. So thank you.